Hello everyone. Welcome again to the NPTEL course Role of Craft and Technology in Interior Architecture. Today we will discuss module 15th. So module 15th is a summary of week 3 and we are going to have a discourse and discussion on that. Plus the assignments that you all are going to do will be a further step in our discourse. So let's just try to summarize what all we saw throughout this week. So the broad contents, what we are going to just summarize and have a look at is creative and cultural industries, understanding definition, significance and scope, discussion and examples, case of creative city Jaipur and European creative cultural industries, building crafts, definitions, perspectives and frameworks, building crafts, craft and technology and its role in creating, enhancing interior architecture and references. So we try to understand what are creative and cultural industries and what this term means, and we discuss the UNESCO definition. So UNESCO defines cultural and creative industries as sectors of organized activity whose principal purpose is the production or reproduction, promotion, distribution, commercialization of goods, services and activities of a cultural, artistic or heritage related nature. So UNESCO defines cultural and creative industries as these activities and also the commercialization of goods and services which are cultural, artistic or heritage related in nature. So we try to understand this. We also saw what United Nations describes creative industries as. So the term creative industries is of relatively recent origin and it has connections with cultural industries such as performing arts and handicrafts. The designation marks a historical shift in approach to potential commercial activities that until recently were regarded purely or predominantly in non-economic terms. So all the art, craft, creative, cultural activities which have been so far regarded in non-economic terms and more as ritualistic and utilitarian. So this is a historical shift to look at them also from an economic perspective as commercial activities. So that's what this entire movement about announcing cultural and creative industries is all about. This is what we discussed. We also tried to understand what is UNESCO Creative Cities Network. Now this network currently has 116 cities and all these cities work together towards a common objective, placing creativity and cultural industries at the heart of their development plans at local levels as well as international levels. From India, we are very proud and fortunate. We have two cities, Jaipur and Varanasi, which are a part of this Creative Cities Network. Jaipur is known for its crafts and folk art, and Varanasi is in this list because of its music. So we further try to understand that this network encourages cultural exchanges in specific categories of cultural and creative industries, and to list a few are crafts and folk arts, design, gastronomy, that is food, films, design, literature, media arts, music. There is also architecture, and we are talking about building crafts and architecture throughout this course, so it is important to highlight. And this network also provides international opportunities for a city's economic growth in the specific sector of creative cultural industries. So the activities which did not have an economic value associated to them, they are also looked upon in terms of commercialized activities and also in terms of trade and economy. So that's how this network encourages these activities. We saw in our previous modules the specific case of Jaipur and how it got designated as a creative city, and we saw how Jaipur is known for its varied creative and cultural industries. It is seen as a city of crafts and folk art, and we see different kinds of craft over here. It's also seen as a city of living heritage, and it is known for its havelis, it is known for its varied kinds of artistic expressions. So that is another category. Then Jaipur is also seen as a city of design, and it has a very unique, distinct urban form, and we can see different palaces and forts and its different cultural landmarks. We also see the topography where they are situated. So there is a uniqueness to them, and Jaipur is seen as the city of design. Then Jaipur again as a city of design, then after going one step further from urban form, we talk about architecture, and we see all these examples of here this is Hawa Mahal, and another one over here we see the forts and palaces, city palace Udaipur, and other different examples. In one of the upcoming modules we are going to discuss them in detail. So it's known for its architecture, it's known for its food, the street food, very distinct Rajasthani food, the Rajasthani thali, dal bati, and other different examples. It's also seen as city of performing arts. So Jaipur is very culturally vibrant city, and it's multifaceted, and we see these different creative and cultural industries which are the heart of Jaipur city, and which form one of the major activities as part of culture and way of life. And now we are looking forward to also see them as economic activities which generate money which can contribute to the GDP of a country. So in those terms we are looking forward. Also, when we are talking about different art craft forms, including the building crafts, we see this plethora of different creative and cultural industries in Jaipur. We see jewelry, pottery, textiles, stone crafts. We discussed all of this in detail. We also see certain paintings and very unique building crafts over here in Jaipur. We tried to also see the overall umbrella. We tried to see some international scenarios, and we also understood how European creative industries also contribute in the generation of GDP and economy, and what is so particular to Finland, and we also saw some examples from Japan. So this was the overview, the different kinds of creative and cultural industries that could be seen in Finland. Over here we saw this example from Japan, and we see the mention of architecture over here. We see origami, which is very famous, and the very famous Japanese paintings. So all of these are again creative and cultural industries. Then we saw the overall case of European creative industries and how they contribute to making a cultural identity there. And we see all these different kinds of creative industries and how they contribute to the creation of employment, jobs, and also wider economy, tourism, food, design, cultural experience. So we saw all this detailed scenario of how European creative economy works. We saw some very interesting statistics and how these data analysis help in bringing forth the importance of all these creative and cultural industries. So here, very importantly, we tried to understand that how in US 4% of GDP comes from all these creative and cultural industries that we see over here, and how this data analytics is very important, which shows that arts and culture contribute to GDP, and what is driving a significant portion of economy today in US is the production of creative and cultural content, and that these industries are a vital part of US economic well-being. And this is the model that we are trying to also follow and adapt to for our nation, because we have also very rich creative and cultural industries. So these data sets, they sometimes substantiate already going on discourse, and they substantiate it and they reinforce the need of why such terms are coming up and why this discourse is happening. We saw some more interesting infographics, and we saw these data, and here we see the creative and cultural industries. They are at the number 3, in the top 3 which contribute to the employment. So more than 7 million Europeans are directly employed by these creative and cultural industries. We saw all these data sets, we saw this data where we saw that how architecture and visual arts, they form an important part of the Europe's creative economy, and we see, like, 5 of the 10 most attended international festivals are in Europe. Lot of museums are visited in Europe, and it's known for its museums and art and craft and creative industries all over the world. We saw different subsectors of creative and cultural industries where we can see again architecture, visual arts and performing arts. Here in the visual arts category, Europe has put arts and crafts. We see it over here, it also has design. So these subsectors are also there. In terms of employment, it has contributed a lot, especially for the youth in the European scenario. And again, so it is benchmarked as one of the top 3. Also, what another important thing that we discussed in one of the modules was that the government is also willing, and it also allocates funds on its cultural services. So that vision is very important, and that kind of expenditure is very crucial for these industries to grow up and for the creation of culturally sustainable livelihoods. Then we tried to understand what are building crafts, and we could sum up that the crafts that are associated with the making of space are known as building crafts, and there is this DICRC model that we discussed in detail. So we see building crafts, and we talk about its varied associations, and for us the prime importance is building crafts, interior architecture, creative industries and these associations, and how the building crafts contribute to creating and enhancing interior architecture, and how all the creative and cultural industries could plug into this larger sector of building crafts, which can result in the creation of interesting interior architecture through different space making elements. So according to DICRC, specialist building skills using traditional materials and techniques required to conserve, preserve, restore and revive the nation's historic buildings and structures. These are the building skills and building crafts, and the practices which employ manual dexterity and skill. So it's handmade, and it recognizes the importance of human skill and manual dexterity, values human skills, and understanding of traditional materials, designs and techniques. So that is how they try to explain what are the indigenous skills and building crafts, and we had a discussion on that. Then we also tried to understand crafts and its varied attributes. So if we are talking about crafts with space making attributes and not just as utilitarian crafts, then we can look at it, consider it in all these 4 different ways, which are obviously not so exhaustive, and the list and the research can go on. So craft as surface finishes, craft as structure, craft as ornamentation, craft as object. We discussed all of these in quite detail. So right now I am just summarizing and giving an overview. Then we try to understand the larger context of crafts. So crafts is a huge umbrella term, and if we see the larger context, there are different kinds of all these art and craft forms, say handicraft, applied art, traditional craft. All these over here that we see, you contribute to the larger context of craft, this sector of craft, and building craft is just another one like the other contributory sectors, and this building craft is what contributes to the interior architecture. And what we see in interior architecture, that we relate to as space making craft or building craft, and that is what we have been discussing in this course, and specifically in few modules. Also these building crafts, how they are defined by different materials. There are different kinds of materials, and these can be defined by them, and we also discuss the need for research and documentation and dissemination and promotion of these skills and building crafts. Also we try to understand that building crafts contribute to the making of space, and that happens largely at 2 levels, which is the structural application and the surface application. And we saw the different elements, right from hardware and accessories to furniture and the entire building in overall gamut of these techniques and activities and materials, we saw at all these different levels and different capacities, these building crafts can contribute to the making of space or enhancing of space, whether it is structurally done or it is done at a surface. We discussed this at length, what is the DICRC framework, and their center of activities and research is craft, and which is seen in traditional and vernacular buildings. So we are talking about building crafts over here, and these five important nodes we discussed, and what all activities they do under each of these nodes, and how they are contributing to discussing these creative and cultural industries, establishing their importance, their value, and what are the challenges in the building craft sector, and how we can bring it back to the mainstream, and how as academicians and architects and designers, through different kinds of research activities and collaborative projects and studios and workshops, we can do our little bit and prevent all these art and craft forms from languishing, from dying. So that is the larger intention. We also discussed again in detail, what are the different categories of space making craft that happen at the level of structure, and which are structurally integrated and which are important for the structural aspect of a building or interior architecture, and also the surface, the ones that are majorly two-dimensional and that are narrative and which go on the surface. So we discussed these two broad categories and the subcategories in detail. We saw the categorization. So what are the major categorizations, and we also see that we can see craft as just artifacts and objects other than structural and the surface domain. So this is what we tried to summarize. We saw some examples. So because we already had this module in detail, I am just going to show the summary and some images. So we saw some examples of each category of craft and from different regions. This is Uttarakhand. Again we saw some examples. Here again, majorly the examples of Uttarakhand, and there is this analysis where we are trying to see different space making elements and different building crafts and how they create or enhance these spaces. Again some examples. This is the discussion that we had out of all the different categories, which one could we see in these furniture elements or interior architecture elements. We saw another few examples like these, and we tried to understand how we can discuss and analyze these craft forms, not just in terms of aesthetics or expressions, but also like how they contribute in creation of space at different levels and different capacities, how it contributes structurally, where it is just a surface embellishment, and all these discussions we had. So after seeing all these interesting examples and the overview of the entire week, let me just try to sum up with some nice quotes. Architecture is 1 part science, 1 part craft, and 2 parts art. So what we are trying to say also throughout this module is that architecture is not just building science. It's also about craft of making it, different skills that come together in the creation of it, and also an expression, also an art. So the entire plethora and the entire gamut of all these activities creates beautiful timeless interior architecture. Then another interesting one, the level of detail and craft is something that's inscribed within the original design concept. And so when I begin to draw, I know what kind of detailing I want the building to have, and this is Tadao Ando, and we all love his buildings, his interior architecture, and it's so close to nature and so crafted and so much detailed out, and that's what he's trying to sum up. So next module will focus on best studies related to this subject. We are going to see some of the best studies when we talk about building crafts and interior architecture. And now some references. Now references are a summation of the entire week's discussion and they are just put together. So I am going to browse through them. This focuses on creative and cultural industries largely. Then we have space making crafts, and we have different kinds of interior architecture styles, especially Uttarakhand, because we saw a lot of examples. Few other sources that talk about craft traditions and paradigms of Indian architecture and different kinds of space making crafts. Again, continued concepts of space making, elements of space making, different kinds of buildings and the craft that goes in them. This is a Bible, Crafts of India, Handmade in India. This is a very good book, and this is really a Bible for all of us who are interested in studying crafts of India. Few others. Again, material, craft, architecture, anthropology, narration, storytelling. Thank you.